Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, and you're not Russell Brand. How does that feel? Oh, yeah. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy, where every day is a new adventure in this, the best of all possible world, or at least the only world that we know about.
Well, Norm, I can't say it's easy being. It's not easy being me, so you probably feel great right now not being me, eh?
Well, I probably do, Russell. I mean, how does it? So, Russell Brand, comedian, actor, cultural brand, source of perpetual energy, creative comic, and we now learn sex offender. So he's the London Times and the BBC's Channel 4 apparently published a documentary about him over the weekend that bears an uncanny resemblance to Ronan Farrow's piece on Harvey Weinstein that helped launch the Me Too movement. And what we learn is that Russell was a bad boy, that Russell had his outsized libidinal energy, which he made into a source of his comedic routines, was apparently directed toward others. And some of those others are now claiming that he, quote unquote, abused them. No criminal charges have been brought yet, either in England or the United States, so far as we know. But those will likely be coming. And what's more, there will likely be civil litigation against Russell. In the meantime, he's already been deplatformed from YouTube instantaneously upon publication of the material. Channel 4's president, I can't remember her name, Alex something or other, has already called on everybody basically to shun him. Britain's Guardian has said, let's get it right this time. Let's rally around the alleged victims. And last night I was interviewed on Newsmax about whether there was such a thing as the presumption of innocence. And I had to remind the host that's a concept that applies in the criminal courts and not necessarily in the court of public opinion. But Brand isn't taking this lying down, no pun intended. Once he got wind of the fact that the documentary was coming, he came out basically. What was the title of the documentary again?
And Norm, before we get started, I just wanted to tell everybody to, and I'll put it on the screen here so you can see it. He came out on Friday and posted a video to his Rumble page, which I believe he is exclusive to Rumble. So he has a show. I believe the show is called, what is it? Something Live Free, I think is the name of the show. Yeah, Live Free. And you can see there in the corner, he has well over 1 million followers on Rumble, streams regularly. He hosted Tucker Carlson very recently, and that discussion was excellent. Norm, if you haven't seen it,
I haven't. No.
It's on his page, and you can see the title of the video here is "So This Is Happening." Mm-hmm. And I told Norm before the stream started that I came across this on Friday, and I believe it's maybe 4 or 5 minutes long, and so I watched it in full while I had that attention span to give it, and he foretold everything that is happening at this current moment in that 5 minutes, that there were sensitive matters that he couldn't go into too many of the details, but definitely alluded to the life that he emerged from during his sort of sex, drugs, rock and roll, fast living era in the, I guess, mid 2000s, early to mid 2000s, and talked about how, two things could be true, that he could, one, not feel great in hindsight about the way he was living, how exploitative that lifestyle ultimately is, not only to other people, but to himself, right? How he's exploiting his youth and his body and his well-being just for these addictions, right? Sexual addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and talked about, the journey that he's been on, freeing himself from those vices. And I think I told you, Norm, that he's been a curious character for me. One of great intrigue, though. And I say curious in a positive sense. I think I think he's very clever, drawn to his humor. I mean, I think he has sort of the brand of humor that I enjoy. And his movie appearances and Forgetting Sarah Marshall and others, always a joy to watch. But he's also a deeply spiritual guy. He pontificates openly, and it traditionally has been on the political left. I also told you that in recent years, as he's launched this platform of Live Free, He has begun to move more to the center as the Overton window in Western media and culture has further deepened its hold on the left. And that has made for an interesting contrast to who and what ultimately guarded Russell and his lifestyle and how open and transparent he was about these things, his marriage to Katy Perry, everything else. He comes from that A-list celebrity culture, Norm. And it is just interesting now at this point when he has gone on, Bill Maher's show and talked openly about the insane profit generated by the pharmaceutical industry during the COVID-19 era on the back of publicly funded vaccine rollout and infrastructure. And it just makes connections that I think a lot of us on the stream and in other places have begun to make as to institutional legitimacy or the lack thereof. And then also having Tucker Carlson on, hitting these really hot button issues in culture. I think YouTube has also completely demonetized his channel, Norm. I don't know if
It did immediately. Yeah.
And again, just to remind everybody, these allegations were made by way of a documentary. There are no existing charges filed in any jurisdiction on the back of these. Now they may come, right? Norm, you can talk more about the statutes of limitations in the United States in particular, and you did so on Newsmax. And I'll make sure that Law Pod Daily, go follow Law Pod Daily on X.
I appeared last night with a guy named Carl Higbee, who I don't see TV, Mike, and candidly, you spend a lot more time on social media than I do. I'm always hearing about things on the show here and reacting to them. So I get the invitation to come on to talk about Saifullah Khan and his defense of sexual assault charges by a fellow Yale student. But actually, the segment was turned to using what we learned in the Khan case to talk about Brand. And Higbee explicitly made the point that you did. And that is, as he's turned to the right, and his commentary and his sense of self has left the comfortable confines of A-list liberalism on the left coast, he's suddenly become a target. And Higbee raised the question, whether these events are coincidental. And now I hear you doing the same thing. And Brand's brand was libidinal excess, as near as I can tell. He had women throwing himself at him and thought, why say no? Ho, ho, ho. And the result was a lifestyle that I think even he would regard as dissolute and unappealing. And so as he has regrouped and tried to come to a sense of himself as a limited being in the midst of a universe of infinite mystery, and has learned to accept his limitations and look for grace, his past is coming back to haunt him. And it might be coming back to haunt him and to bury him for political reasons, because if Brand is going to raise questions about the money that Big Pharma is making peddling fear and hysteria, well, maybe the time to destroy Brand's brand is now. And if you can get him off the platform, you can silence a powerful voice. I mean, that is that argument. It won't be a defense to any criminal cases that he raises, changes that he faces. Charges in the criminal courts. The state has the burden of proving the elements of the offense it charges, and so and the court will police the admissibility of evidence to determine what is material, that is, what matters in terms of the elements of the offense and relevant to proving what matters. High-flying speculation about social norms, mores, and whatnot typically isn't cricket, as it were. But I'm looking at a story in this morning's Variety. No, it's not this morning, Saturday's Variety, because I was trying to figure out what is it that he's allegedly done. And so you look at some of these claims. A 24-year-old runner on a set claimed that Brand once flashed his penis when she went into his dressing room and insinuated she could give him oral sex. Again, not proud of that. It's not. I wouldn't want that on my highlights reel. But this isn't exactly raping somebody. Another claim. Brand's former personal assistant, Helen Berger, told the newspaper, that would be the Times of London, that she witnessed Brand showing intimate pictures of women to his friends, including pictures of a woman she knew. I mean, really? this is going to lead to the international ostracism of this man. I mean, he had comedic tours planned in down under in Australia that were abruptly canceled as a result of this. He was removed from YouTube because he showed pictures, intimate pictures of women to others. Now he's called a rapist. Another, a female comedian said Brand would repeatedly bite my face whenever she saw him while a male comedian. Daniel Scott told the newspaper he was aware that his female counterparts had been warning each other about Russell for years. I mean, you know, there's no cannibalism charge here as far as I know. But, you know, one of the questions that I think Brand and his lawyers will be asking these women, should they surface in either a civil or criminal context, is what were you doing with your face close enough to be bitten? You know, I mean, you know, Brand was a charismatic source of access, power, and frankly, the joy that comes of being around a person who's plugged into himself. That charisma is a Greek term, gift of God, filled with life, a defining personality. And in the hothouse environment of Hollywood, it's no mystery that a lot of young people are drawn to powerful men and women, and a lot of young women and a lot of young men will make deals with the devil to get what they want, some of that charisma. And so I think that Brand would be wise going into this to say as little as possible about his confrontations and interactions with these accusers, because in the event that they come forward in a public forum to testify against him, he'll have a right either on the civil or criminal side to cross-examine them. So let me tell you a little story about what cross-examination looks like in the context of a consent sex assault case. Earlier this summer, my office defended a young man. Oh, he's not so young, but everybody's young by my standards these days. A guy in his 40s, Mr. White. And Mr. White was accused of raping a colleague of his in his office one night at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And so the young woman testified, and she was tearful, and it was a gripping piece of courtroom theater. And then I began to cross-examine her. We had photographs of the two of them together before the alleged rape. So this took place at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning after a Sunday night. She was his office manager, and they'd gone out to dinner to discuss scheduling for the next week. It was a small shop with just a handful of employees. I said, well, you usually did that on the phone. Yeah, he invited you to dinner this time. Yes. And how long did that discussion take place about the employees? I don't recall. Well, when you did it on the phone, it was usually 10 or 15 minutes. Isn't that right? Something like that. So you were at that dinner for 4.5 hours because we knew she'd been in the restaurant. Yeah. What else did you discuss during that dinner? Oh, I don't remember, she cried. And I said, well, there was a DJ there, yes. And I don't and you remember dancing with Mr. White? I don't remember. So we showed her pictures of herself on the dance floor. How much did you drink that night? Well, I don't remember. Well, we had a witness that said there was some drinking going on. So now she's had 2 or 3 maybe drinks or more. And then as on the dance floor with somebody, and then we showed her, and the state had showed the jury a text message where she had texted someone saying, he said he's wearing sunglasses because he thinks I look sexy. And she had some sort of emoji afterwards. And I said, do you remember your testimony about the sunglasses? Ralph looked at you. I said, you were wearing them on the dance floor by the end of that evening, weren't you? I don't remember. Showed her the picture. Is that you? I don't remember. And so I'm watching the jury sort of fade away at this point, and then we get to chapter 2. So after that 4.5-hour business meeting with the dancing DJ and your sunglasses, you went to a restaurant to have some dinner with Ralph. What'd you talk about there? I don't remember. And then he asked you to come to the office at 1 o'clock in the morning to help him move some furniture and a snowblower, maybe, believe it or not, a snowblower in the office. Yeah, and that's when he raped you. Yes. We didn't ask her a question about the mechanics of the rape. We didn't ask her a question about how he touched her, how he penetrated her, how it went down. Because if we did, it would have opened the door for the state's ability to redirect her and to get into these allegations yet again. And they had an expert in the wings that would have testified about the mechanics of a sexual assault in a person's memory. And we didn't want that expert to testify. We'd gotten a ruling prior to the case going to the jury that expert would only testify depending on what the woman said. So we made a tactical gamble. And the context of her interaction with Mr. White that night, the events that in the hours leading up to it, cast so much doubt on everything that she had to say. We didn't feel it was necessary to ask her a question about the rape itself. And strategically, we thought it would have been unwise to do so because it would have been opening the door to other evidence that would have hurt our client. So the jury promptly acquitted Mr. White, not just of rape, but of misdemeanor sexual assault as well. And the criminal case is over. Now, of course, she sued him civilly, and we will soon have to face those allegations in a civil courtroom by a lesser standard of proof. And some of you may say, well, wait a minute, he's been acquitted. How can he be sued civilly? The legal standard for proof in a criminal case is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a lesser standard in civil cases. That is, the plaintiff, the party seeking money, has to prove by a preponderance of the evidence. That is, that something's more likely than not, a 51% possibility that it occurred. And so a jury could acquit in a criminal case and convict in a civil case. And there's intellectual integrity to that. And so, we're not cocky about our prospects in any form. Also, in a criminal case, the state cannot call your client as a witness. A person has a right to remain silent. In a civil case, especially now that he's won the criminal case, there's no potential for jeopardy to attach. So he has no right to plead the fifth, and he will be called as a witness. And it may be that the jury concludes otherwise, that reaches a different conclusion. Similarly, in the Saif Khan case, which was
this is I just wanted to interject here for a moment because you were on Newsmax last night specifically to talk about that case, the Saif Khan case, which is what we covered yesterday in the stream, right? The New York Times picked it up. We talked about that, and I guess it's just sort of fortuitous that we have the opportunity to bring that back, but in the context of comparing what Russell Brand is, I guess, experiencing now, not even being a criminal defendant quite yet, but experiencing now versus your strategy as the defense attorney on Mr. Khan's behalf. And I guess the importance of certain types of advocacy, a certain brand of advocacy. I think you called it going on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when you are accused of a crime, you need to go on the offensive. You need to go on the attack. If you sit back and wait for the state to bring it to you, you've lost half the fight. So in the Khan case, he one Halloween night, I believe it was in 2015, a couple of Yale students found themselves in her room with Mr. Khan, and she, engaged in connubial bliss. And when she woke up, or when it was done, she basically said, "You need to get out of here. This isn't okay." And shortly thereafter, she ends up going to the campus infirmary, claiming that she and her boyfriend had consensual sex, and she wanted an abortion fix. And then shortly thereafter, of course, it had become rape. And so in that case, the state presented her as a witness and presented her version of events, but we knew a lot about what was going on at Yale that night. And we knew a lot about her. We knew that she had sent Khan flirtatious text messages. We knew that she sent him a text message because he was perceived as a leader on campus that contained one of Shakespeare's love sonnets in the text message. And so when she was on the witness stand, I started to read her the love sonnet from Shakespeare, and she claimed she didn't know it was in the text message. And I said, then why'd you send it? And the jury was kind of looking at her. We raised questions about what was going on, the ethos at Yale. I mean, in the laundry rooms in the dorms, they have condom machines, and that's presumably unrelated to cleaning your sheets, or maybe it is related to cleaning your sheets, depending on what was going on. Why had any of them stopped in the basement on the way over? We raised questions about the communications between she and Saif. right after the event. This was a different strategy. So where Saif got on the phone with one of his classmates and talked to the young woman while they were in the room after apparently the sexual encounter. And Saif acknowledged to the young woman on the phone that, that he was with this woman and intimated that things had gone down the way they had. And then her various inconsistencies thereafter. The state produced the costume that she wore that night, a Halloween costume, which was a cat suit with a revealing cut. And and I asked her at trial, why'd you dress up as a cat that night? Why not a long flowing gown and Cinderella? Context mattered. She was flirtatious. She was portraying herself in an available light. She ended up with Mr. Khan in her room. She told people thereafter that it was consensual at the clinic to get an abortion drug. And it was only after campus groupies worked her over and the Title IX people got their hands on her that she decided to cry rape. And at that moment, Yale turned against Khan, threw him off campus. He was charged criminally. We had to go to a jury trial in that case where we cross-examined the woman for hours. And again, the jury acquitted because they concluded it was consensual. Yale, nonetheless, threw Khan off campus, and we sued Yale and the young woman. And that case has bounced around the federal and state courts now for about 5 or 6 years. We're still waiting to get to discovery. We've been to the Connecticut Supreme Court, which savaged Yale's administrative process, basically calling it a kangaroo court that doesn't provide any assurances of reliability. And we are now raising openly the following question. Why should she be treated as Jane Doe when Saif was treated as a criminal through the world at large and everyone knows his name? We're still calling her Jane Doe. What do you call an accuser who makes a false accusation? They're not entitled to pseudonymous or anonymity. Their name should be known so that there is fair warning to the public that this is a person who once sought to destroy a man with her accusations on conduct that at least a jury found to be consensual. Now, victims' rights groups say, oh, the Khan case is horrible. As a result of this, quote unquote, victims are going to be afraid to come forward. Wait a minute. You're only a victim when somebody finds the facts in your favor. You are an accuser until that point. And in our view, Mr. Khan is the true victim in this case. And we've sued Yale. He asked me to put in the complaint $110 million. And, I had some reservations. I thought that was a lot of money. I still do. But when you think of Yale's $4+ billion endowment, they've got it. And when you think of what they took from Khan, this was a young man who had family members killed by the Taliban in Afghanistan. The family fled to a refugee camp in Pakistan, where he was spotted as a young man of extraordinary promise, came to Yale's attention, and they basically recruited him, sent him to a finishing school, a boarding school in the United States for a year or so, as he jokingly says, to teach him to use a knife and fork. And then they brought him on campus and promised him the world. When a young woman came forward to cry rape, they threw him out like a piece of garbage onto the street. And after offering him the world, they treated him like trailer trash. And so I think from Khan's perspective, he is an unbelievably talented young man. They promised him the world, and we're going to get a piece of that world back for him. Now, in the Russell Brand, and so, the defense in the Khan case was to attack the accuser. And I got denounced in Time magazine, of all places, for my cross-examination of the woman. I was mean. I was insensitive. Goddamn right I was. You were looking to lock my client up for 20 or 30 years and basically have him die behind bars on allegations that were about as flimsy as a $3 bill. And you expected me to take that $3 bill, put it in the bank, and try to draw interest on it? Not on your life. So Russell Brand, the message to him today is, hustle up for war, Russell, and come out swinging. There is no reason in the world that these accusers should be given the benefit of any doubt. This isn't Me Too Redux. This isn't Me Too done over again. This isn't Harvey Weinstein and Ronan Farrow, creating a social movement. This was a man who behaved like a dog. And I think he'd probably tell you he did. If it moved and it wiggled and it moved and wiggled in his face, he took it if he could get it. And I'm sure that some of those interactions he is ashamed of, and I'm sure that the women who participated in them are ashamed of as well. But he wasn't, walking down the streets pulling young women into doorways. What he was doing was taking advantage of ambiguous situations in which both parties sought something. And both parties sought to gain from the interaction. And now some of them have buyer's remorse, and some of them are being used by political movements to take Mr. Brand down. And I think Mr. Brand needs to try, if he can. I mean, I get the impression reading about him, Mike, that this guy had so many sexual encounters, he may not be able to remember them all. He may not even be able to remember
that's more than likely the case. And I don't even think that's the point. I think that, so several questions here. Jackie says, I believe in innocent until proven guilty, but the problem is due to public opinion and social media. His career is over, and that is sad. So I wanted to highlight that.
I don't think his career is over. I think
I was going to say, so for two reasons I wanted to highlight that. One, yes, due process, the United States is innocent until proven guilty, but also what we titled this section was on purpose, right? Sexual assault allegations and high-tech lynchings. I'm taking this from Justice Clarence Thomas's confirmation hearing, in which he called this era of attacking the person in the press and depersoning them in the media as the equivalent of high-tech lynchings. Right now, Russell Brand is being tarred and feathered, right? This is in my view, just the same as somebody being physically killed, 100 years ago, right? When technology didn't exist.
Oh boy, are you going to be accused of racism for that?
In terms of someone wants to silence Russell, and it's not just someone, it's plural, right? There were powers that be that have a vested interest in silencing Russell. He has over 1 million followers on Rumble. He is connected to one Tucker Carlson, who is the next coming of Satan, if you ask anybody, slightly to the left of center in the United States. And he also has a past that is connected to all of the A-list celebrities in Hollywood. Again, he was married to Katy Perry for 2 years, I think 2010 to 2012. This guy comes from the fabric of what of the guard, as it were, for Western media and in these institutions. He understands how these things work behind the scenes. That's why he was able to get out in front and give a message to everybody the Friday before the reveal of the documentary on Saturday. And I guess Norm, when I'm listening to you talk, it's tough because right now it's as if they're goading him into some sort of civil lawsuit. So I want to get over to on Rumble. Lawyer Will asks, in reference to the first case that you described, Norm, can one reference his criminal acquittal in a subsequent civil case?
You can try, but most judges will not permit it. They would deem it inadmissible, as likely to lead to jury confusion. On the theory that a jury would likely confuse the standard of the legal standard in the criminal case with the civil case. However, in cross-examining the witness, if her testimony differs materially from the criminal case, I would argue that she's opened the door to that, and it would come in the following way. Ma'am, you just testified that he did some horrible thing to you. Yes, you testified about that you testified about these events on a criminal proceeding. Isn't that true? Yes. And in that criminal proceeding, you didn't mention whatever this horrible thing was. Isn't that true? Oh, I don't remember. You put the transcript and you say, with looking at your testimony, refresh your memory. She says yes. Then you put it in front of her. You ask her to review it. When she's reviewed it, you didn't mention it, did you? I guess not. Did you forget then? No. Well, maybe you have a motive now. Isn't that right? Yeah, because in that prior proceeding, the fact finder found, and then you got to get the court's permission. You testified, he was found not guilty. You got to do better this time. You got to do better this time, because if you don't do better this time, you might get the same result. And what's more, you might not get paid. And so that's how that'll break, Lawyer Will. By the way, Lawyer Will, it was good to see you on Law and Legitimacy this weekend. I'm sorry about how things turned out. Not.
Pete Atkinson is in the chat as well, and Pete echoes, I think, what I began with in discussing Russell Brand. He says Russell has publicly talked about his sexual addiction in the past, etc. Doesn't mean that he is guilty at all, and in fact, that he is a voice for virtue in sexuality. And I think the rest of that comment got hidden due to length. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, Pete says he has to show up on time. It's okay, Pete. We're just glad that you're here. And also, Pete, the Merry Beggars. Awesome stuff.
He has been so busy lately.
I know.
I mean, folks, I don't know why you're wasting your time on Law and Legitimacy. We are men of unclean lips, as the prophet Isaiah might say, mere profane scriveners commenting on the tragedy that is our time. Pete, on the other hand, consorts with saints, and he's trying to show us visions of a better world by people who were spiritually courageous in the context of our time. On the screen, you see his latest project, The Saints. Tell us about it, Mike.
Pete could probably do a better job than I can because he has spent so much time producing these, but there are now, I believe, 2 episodes. These are episodes designed for a sort of a biopic, as it were, of the Saints. And there are 2 episodes that have been produced. You can subscribe for free. And I think, Pete, we should just have you on in the near future. I would say over the next couple of weeks, as you have time. Norm and I would love nothing more than for you to come on and sort of brag about your early work here. Everything that we've seen thus far looks awesome, man. And
let me know, Pete, when you do my favorite saint, Saint Jude. The saint for those who embrace impossible causes, because that is my life. Like Don Quixote, if there's a windmill in the neighborhood, I'm tilting against it. So there we have it.
Well, we didn't get to this. I'm going to put this back on the screen just briefly. This came across yesterday, Norm, and we wanted to talk about it. I think just departing from Russell Brand is sort of abrupt there. We'll talk more about Russell, but do go to his YouTube channel or his Rumble channel and tell him that Norm and I are talking about him, and in particular that he needs to go on offense in his legal defense and to engage Norm. Anyway,
Russell, you got that?
Yeah. The New York Post reports that the FBI lost count of how many paid informants there were at the Capitol on January 6th, later performed an audit to figure out exact number. That's just really interesting, considering the fact that confidential human sources was a major theme in the especially the Proud Boys' defenses against the charges of seditious conspiracy and others during your representation of Joe Biggs and Zachary Real, Norm.
Well, let's talk about this tomorrow and let's lead with this tomorrow. And I'll tell you all about an extraordinary conversation I had with senior Justice Department lawyers late one night during trial and the stipulation that they entered to in the Proud Boys to keep us from asking more probing questions.
I would love to hear that. Here we go. I guess I'm amazed. We've got quite a few people in the chat here. I'm sad that we've got to end the stream so soon. But thank you, everyone, for being here. In the cloud, Pete Atkinson, Lawyer Will, Hans, great to see you. I think we had Jackie P and BTL over on Rumble, and then over on YouTube, of course, Dawn McNeil, Freedom Lover, Uncle Pat, Angry Dog, and
Gold Store, Connecticut. Let's not forget Gold Store, Connecticut.
That's right. And I don't know who the matchups are this week. Norm, who are you matched up with in Ball and Legitimacy this week?
I can't remember. I looked last night because I was trying to figure out how to work the waiver wires, pick up a new wide receiver or two. But my heart goes out to whoever it is that I'm confronting, because I know last week I was an underdog against Lawyer Will, and I brought my fantasy team into my fantasy locker room, and I gave him my fantasy Newt Rockney speech, and we beat the odds, as we will this week, as we will in week 6 when my team faces yours, Mike. I give you plenty of time to prepare your excuses, bluster as will, because come week 7, I will be 6-0 and you will be 5-1.
I want you to hear me say this. You're going to need a bigger engine, because RPM, that is Robinson, Pollard, and Mingo, LLP, is high octane.
The objectors are guerrilla war fighters, like all good criminal defense lawyers are. Never underestimate the grit of a determined man who's got nothing but his wits to live by and a sense of desperation to inflame his passion. Your team is going down. DONN. Look it up, embrace it, you're going to live it. Thanks, folks, for listening to Law and Legitimacy.
Absolutely. You know where to find us. We are on YouTube. We are on Twitter, or formerly Twitter, now X, at LawPod Daily. Please go and follow us over there. And we're also on Rumble Video. We appreciate everybody every day, 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. If you don't catch us live on these streams, you can always catch the replay on any of those platforms. We will begin to get all of those things organized into various categories, almost like an archive of sorts. In the next few weeks, Norm and I have stumbled upon someone who is interested in helping us do just that. And then we also are on any podcast platform, wherever you get your podcasts, but namely Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Audible, Overcast. Rate us 5 stars, leave us a nice comment, or leave us alone. Jackie P, no one is underestimating the Victoria's Secrets.
That's her fantasy football team. I mean, with a name like that, I think she's wanting to compete with Russell Brand. Will we be defending them both soon? Who knows?
Live free, baby. Live free. All right, Norm. We will begin with the CHS conversation tomorrow. Please make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening from or watching from. So few of you are actually subscribed, even though we know where the views are coming from. We can see all of this data. Just hit the button, please. Anyway, Norm, we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao.